right, I asked that everybody go out, please, to the P drive for the class and copy the folder with today's date on it to your htdocs folder. Hopefully you've done that already. If you do that, and then if you go in then and start up XAMPP and bring that up, all right, this is what you're going to see. Doesn't look like much. I gave an assignment, now this is probably 4 years ago, and the person in the class, Ken, who probably did the best job on it, he gave me a copy of it, and I modified it several times since then. So what I've got in here now, and I just want to run through this with you, is this is the home page. There's not much on it, and this will be our customers page. All right, and with the stuff that's here now, if you run this, you're going to have a problem because you don't have a database yet. Everybody hear that? Okay, I'll show you how to get it in just a couple seconds. But notice, for instance, let's say that, there you go, Zachary Ehrlich wants to be called Zach because all people named Zachary want to be called Zach, right? So we could edit here. We could change it from Zachary to Zach, submit it, and the user has been edited. If we go back into our customers, you see that it's changed. That makes sense? All right, so it's the idea, it's very similar to the thing that we ran over last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. We went over that blog. But this is actually something you could really use, ideally at least, in a real world type of situation. So if you've done that, just so you can see this, all right, here's what's actually in that particular folder. And this is what we're going to go over between now and 4 o'clock. The first thing that you should do, now if you don't want to do it the way I'm telling you, then don't. But I will tell you that the way I'm going to tell you this will work. All right? So the first thing I recommend, if you look up on the screen here, is that bring up your screen here from XAMPP and go up and click where it says Shell. Now I've already got the database in there. Okay, I've already got the database in there, but I'm going to remove it, and that's okay. What's going to happen if you listen to this is I took the script from a database that was in a book that I used to use, and I made some modifications to the script. So I want to show you the script and then show you the stuff that goes in there. I've updated the dates to 2013 and 2014. All right, and I'll show you that, and then we'll run this. But I'd recommend then go in and click where it says Shell. All right, and it comes up here. I don't know. Did we go through this in the 147 class? Did we just use PHPMyAdmin, or did we do both? Okay. So it's MySQL minus U root. You type that in there. If you type that in and you hit enter and it looks like this, that worked. Now your connection ID might be different. That doesn't really matter. It's much easier for what we're about to do, in my opinion, to do it this way as opposed to going into PHPMyAdmin. You may not agree. All right, and that's fine. So I'm going to, for right now, I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to minimize where I've got this here. And now this is the stuff that we're going to be going through right now, okay? You'll notice that right now I'm not going to go through these, but if I went through order details, orders and reports, all it says right now is this will be implemented later. So I'm not going to go through those. Does that make sense? We're going to go through those next week. All right, but not now. All right. The one I care about, though, is where it says database, because these are your two database files. So I'm going to open them in Notepad++ just to show you them. Again, this is a little bit of review, and never hurts to just take a minute or two and go back over this. Now, you're going to get a warning message because you probably don't have a database called sales orders. You might, but you probably don't. So this says drop database if exists sales orders. I've got one, so I won't get the warning. It's not going to be an error. You're going to get a warning if you were to run this right now, as it'll say you don't have a database named sales orders, so there's really nothing to drop. It doesn't hurt anything. All right? So this says to drop the database. Since I've already got it, I'm going to run the script and I'll drop mine. And you'll notice that when I look in here, so if I say, you don't have to do this, but if I say show databases, one of the ones that's in there is sales orders. I think everybody'd agree. You can take a look and you'll see that it's right there. All right? But I'm going to remove it and then recreate it. Okay? So that database will have the following tables in it. So we create the database, we make it active, then we first come in and create a table called categories, then we create another table that's called customers, then we come in and create another table called employees, then we come in and create another one that's called order details, another one that's called orders, another one that's called product vendors, products, and vendors. Then we go in afterwards and add all the primary keys and all the other stuff. Again, this is from a book that I used to use for the 147 class. You probably even use this database when you had the 147 class if you had it with me. All right. If you didn't have it with me, then I can't speak to it because I don't know. All right. Then after we've done that, then we're going to run this one. And this, you'll notice, is over 10,000 lines long. Now that's the bad news. The good news is it still only takes about 1 or 2 minutes to run. Okay? It really doesn't take much time. So what I'd like you to do is to go over to the first file here that's called salesorderstructure.sql. That file, if you don't have it up, bring it up in your favorite editor. It doesn't have to be Notepad++. It could be Notepad. Don't bring it up in Word and then tell me later that this stuff didn't work. And then however you typically highlight the entire file, Control A, or whatever you do, edit, if you typically do edit, select all, whatever. But the whole thing should be in gray. Does that make sense? Then however you do a copy, again I do a Control C for copy. Then move over to where you just put this, and please don't do a Control V because it'll put a Control V on your screen. Right mouse click and choose paste. And it's going through all the fun stuff. That's it. All the tables were made. So the database was made and the tables were made. But if you look, you don't have to do this, but if you look on the screen now, I'm going to say use sales orders. All right. And I'm going to, if we looked in here, remember when I ran this before, those are my customers. So now if I look, if I say select star from customers, you notice it's empty because I removed the database and all I've done now is replicate the structure. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So then we're going to come up to the other table that's here, or the other .sql file. So you can close the one that's called salesorderstructure.sql. There's nothing else we need from there. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a Control A to highlight all of it, a Control C to copy it. I'm going to come back over to here. I'm going to right mouse click and choose paste. And now it's starting to fill in all of the data. One of these tables has about 4,000 records in it, and that's why it's taking so long. Just so you know, it's done already. No, it's not. Yes, it is. It's done already. The reason that it's taking this long is it buffers all the output. So it's already finished, but it's just throwing everything out now to tell you that it's worked, for lack of better words. The reason that I like doing it this way as opposed to going in, and it's done. The reason I like doing it this way as opposed to going in and using PHPMyAdmin is PHPMyAdmin seems, the buffer size seems to be pretty small in it. And when I try to put too much in, it tends to choke. This has not done that, even with something this big. Doug and I wrote a database together a while, this was years ago. It's still out there someplace. I'd have to look for it. But it has over 7,000 records in it. I designed it and put in some of the initial data, and he did some really cool stuff then. What he did was, he said, I don't want to have to key in 7,000 records. So he went in, and some of the names that are in there look really goofy, because what he did was he used permutations of words, and then he put them together in Excel, and then filled the spreadsheet from that. All right, because he was teaching himself advanced Excel macros at the time, so we did it that way. But it worked, and when we dropped it in like this, literally it took, that's about how much time it took, was what you just saw. All right, now notice if I come back and do the same thing I did before, now if I say select star from customers, now there's 27 records in there. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. And notice, if you look up here, because yours, I don't think mine's going to change, but I think yours will. So if you look up here, I'm going to refresh the screen. Okay, that's all I'm doing right now is because I've got this running already, but I'm refreshing the screen. See how it changed back to Zachary? Because that's the way it was in the database. All right, and I hadn't done a save on it yet. Actually, that's not true. That's neither here nor there. The copy that I made the change on is not the copy I'm running right now. All right. But now you should be able to open that up. So you should be able to bring up, you already probably have XAMPP running, so you should be able to say localhost, and if you've copied that over like I asked you to do, you should be able to say, now yours is going to be different because you can't just say sales orders because I put it in the folder. So yours is going to be localhost 10/13/2014 sales orders. All right, that should be what you run. 11/13, thank you. Well, that would be right if it was last month. All right. See, that's why I like all you. You keep me on my toes. John especially. I will tell you, I was going to tell you this privately, but I'll tell it to you now. Hopefully I won't embarrass you because I'm really not trying to. After that grant ends, if you're interested in staying on and I'm still here, I'm going to fight to see if you can. Because I appreciate all the work you've done. I appreciate Mike too. You know, I appreciate the work both of you have done. So. Now I know how, you know how I felt yesterday when I was at the VETS presentation and Jamil Khan was one of the speakers. Before he starts, he was one of my students. He's probably 60, something like that. And he goes, yeah, I'm not going to do an Indian accent because that would be derogatory. I don't want to do it. But he just goes, he says, before I start, just so you know, if you're a student here and you don't know what classes to take, and he points at me and goes, take them with that guy. That's Jeff, and he really knows what the heck he's doing. And then he gets, you know, I said, thank you, and then he gets done, and he goes, and he didn't pay me to say that either. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Did you hear him say that, Kelly? Because I thought, okay, it was enough that he said that, but then I'm thinking people are going to think I did pay him to say that. And now you get your wish, Teresa, because now it's snowing out pretty hard. Not enough to build your snowman, though. But if you want, Laura may sing to you some more later if you want. All right. So right now, again, the reports, we're going to do that either next week, probably next week. And the orders and the order details, we're going to do that next week. So right now, the only thing that's implemented in here, in this, the whole thing is just the home page, which doesn't have much in it, and the customers page. All right, so what I want to do between now and 4 o'clock is go through some of that code. Does that make sense? So you've got all that code. All right, and what I decided to do was rather than give you another assignment, because you got enough homework already. All right, I'm just giving you this stuff. So I'll give you the next part, and we'll go over that on Tuesday. We'll go over the next part on Thursday. The idea is what we'll be able to do is when we go to orders, you'll click on that, and either you'll be able to enter an order. That's the way it is right now. I don't like that. I'd like to have it more like this, where it'll show all the orders. All right. And then what you'll be able to do is so let's say that, you know, these were the orders here. So if you've got order 1, 2, 3, you'll be able to, there won't be a delete and an edit because those orders have already been placed. But you'll be able to go and click, for example, on order 1, 2, 3, and what that'll do is that'll show those details. All right, so you can see everything that was ordered in that one. So the interface may change here a little bit. That's what I'm telling you. But you'll get all the code, and you won't have to do anything else with the database. That's done now. All right. Then I'm going to come up and actually create some reports, and that's probably what we'll do a week from today. Okay. And there's at least a chance that we'll see, but the following week, the week of Thanksgiving, is going to be lab the entire week. I'm going to try to make it lab in, I may lecture, like I said, in the 161 class, but I'm going to try to make it lab in all the other Tuesday, Thursday classes. All right, because I've given you a bunch of stuff that I said is due. Now, if you say, Jeff, I've been busting my whatever, and really trying, but there's no way I'm going to get this stuff done by the, just get it in as soon as you can. What I don't want, especially those of you who have other classes with Denny and Arinda or Gen Ed classes or any other class, I don't want it where the last couple weeks in class you're busting your butt trying to get all your IT stuff done. The one thing that is due for sure at the end of the semester, as I said, is the one for the 158 class, your Joomla thing that you're working on. All right, and some of you have gone through it. I know Mark has talked to me, and you know there are some errors in some of the stuff that the book asks you to download. Literally, if you go and you bring it in there, it comes up with a PHP error. Now, I mean, I could go in and try to debug that. I'm not real comfortable trying, even if I found the error, going into Joomla's code and changing it. All right, because all I'm thinking is that might fix the error, but it might introduce other errors. If I was the developer, I'd have no problem at all doing that. But I'm not. So I said, that's okay. If the stuff doesn't work totally, that's okay. Then go on and try to find something else that does work. All right. It's interesting because one of my students from last year, I think, John, I think you knew him, and Laura, I know, knows him. And maybe you remember him, Steve Helsell. He used to sit back there, the guy with the real long hair. Yeah, Mr. Bacon. Steve has got a friend who has got a website, and I don't, he's written, we've been communicating back and forth all week because I don't understand all of it. He sells stuff, but he doesn't want an e-commerce site. And I don't understand that, but this is what he's told me. And he said that the guy wants, he's going to have Steve give him some help. He's pretty computer savvy, but he wants Steve to help him build that part for that site. And he said, you know anything like that? And I mentioned WordPress, and I mentioned Joomla. And I went out to the itbooks.info site and grabbed some URLs and sent him some URLs for both of them. He's been looking at them all week. And he wrote back and he said, well, what have you had your class learn this semester? And I said, Joomla. Today he wrote back and he said, why the hell didn't you have them learn WordPress? It's easier, it's more intuitive, and it actually seems to be a lot more fun. He very well could be right. My response to him, I'll just tell you exactly what I wrote. I said, Steve, my reason was a selfish one. I already know WordPress and I wanted to learn Joomla. So that forced me into learning it. I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed that guy's book, even with all the trials and tribulations. And I think I learned something that ideally, at least, could be a marketable skill. There's a chance that if I'm the person teaching the class next time, it could end up that the advanced website development class, it could end up that that class ends up being a WordPress class. I don't know. Sooner or later, what I want to do is I want to incorporate Bootstrap into this too. I don't know exactly where that falls, and I don't know exactly, you know, how much I'm going to be able to do. I'm going to actually try to show Bootstrap to the first-year people next week. We're going to build a simple site with Bootstrap. All right. And I know, Zane, you'd said that. I'm not even going to mention the name of the person, but you said that when you had it. This is my biggest problem. Is right now it's scheduled that person is going to end up teaching the class again in fall, because they're light on their load. So they're light on their load, so I'm the one that my program, I'm not saying has to suffer for it, but if it was reversed, and it was, guess what? 5 years ago, they suspended this program before it became the Programmer Analyst program, before it became Web Programmer Analyst. They suspended it. And I didn't have a person in any other program say, because I didn't have classes to teach. I had just the second, you know, you had to get the people through. We didn't take on new people. Kind of what they're doing with the security people right now. And nobody from any of those programs came in and said, why don't you teach in our program so you can get load? But now I'm supposed to do that. And I'm supposed to do that with a smile on my face and a song in my heart. And the person who was teaching that was doing the best they could. No, I'm just saying, I don't hold any ill will towards them. But I think the same thing that happened, the same thing would have happened if I would have been teaching a class in their area. I really do, because I don't have the expertise. Now I've got expertise that they don't even know I have. That's not a joke. I've actually taught Unix classes. All right, and I've sat there and I wrote a 10,000 line Unix app, so I can do that. All right. But when I've mentioned that, it was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. All right, so let's go through and take a look at the files that are in here. I can close this one now too. We don't need that anymore. So what I want to do for the rest of the period today is look at all the stuff that's in here. Again, just quickly, just so you see this, all three of these files, the orders, the reports, orders, and order details, they all look exactly the same. Okay? And so they include the header. There's an echo that says that particular page will be implemented later, and they include the footer. Okay? And one thing about Ullman, he loves to have the page title on every page, you know, up in the status bar up here. So that's why I just implemented like he did. Okay? So as far as I'm concerned, we don't have to talk about those three now anymore. Okay? All right. Then looking, the CSS that's in here, back when I assigned this, this is the CSS that he was using. He had permission to use it from this guy, and since we're not trying to make any money on this, we're using it for demonstration and educational purposes, I figured it'd be fine to keep using it. All right, so that's all the stuff that he had, boom, 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 stuff he had, stuff he had, stuff he had. Put a couple things in here at the bottom. That's all of it. You literally can see every bit of it. This is something that Ullman added, which just said if you've got an error condition, put it in red and make it bold. No biggie there. And a couple things that would have been added here. A class for the page header, just so it had a constant font size and color. For modified links, same kind of thing. And for the navigation links. That's it. That's it. Now, again, I have no idea if Orinda ever talked to you about that particular thing in there. Okay? That's add important. That's actually a CSS directive. And what it's saying is, I know you're not supposed to do that, but screw you, do it anyway. When you make something important, you're saying do an override, whether you're supposed to do an override or not. Where it becomes problematic is if you put that add important all over the place in there, because then you're overwriting your overwrites. So typically, if you put an add important in there, you put it in there only once or twice. Okay, just so you're aware of that. All right, all right. So that's it for talking about the CSS. So we've gone through the CSS. We already went through the database. So let's, you know, that's the image. It's just got that picture in it. I went out there and tried to find one that would look, you know, I actually went to Google Images. I love Google Images, and typed in databases. Kept looking around until I found one. All right, and I found a lot of cool ones, but this was a good sized one. And the other ones, when I tried to resize them myself, they looked like I tried to resize them myself. So that's the one I used. All right, then includes. Let's look at the header and let's look at the footer. Footer's pretty simple. This is taken right out of his book. All right, where this is in there. It doesn't have to be, but if I wanted to add any PHP, I could add it in there. So I just put that in there for that reason. All right, this is the end of the, as it says, the end of the page specific content. It ends with a div, and that's about as simple as you can get. Copyright with Blackhawk Technical College 2014. So that made this. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So there's a common look and feel on every page as far as that goes. All right. The header, a little bigger, but it's really, when you look, it's really not very big. What I've been tending to do, and maybe this is stupid, but I've been tending to break this kind of stuff in here up in multiple lines. I started doing that for the first year people so I can talk about each thing and highlight the line that's in question. But you know as well as I do, this could have all been put onto one page or onto one line, and that would be fine. But just by breaking it up, it just makes it a little easier. The only reason I'm telling you that, it's only 34 lines, but if you look, I could have cut it down to under 30 or around 30 by just, you know, putting that stuff on in here on a single line. All right. The other thing that Ullman didn't do, because his book's a little dated, is it wasn't HTML5 compliant, so I made it HTML5 compliant. Other than that, this is set up very similar to the way he set up stuff in the book. Okay? And I think I mentioned this, but a year ago, one of the reasons that right now, I don't know if you were around here then, John, or not, but a year ago, for the 158 class, for people who took 148, which is your class, was PHP. People who took 158, guess what? It was another Ullman PHP book, and they got a double helping of it. I thought after a while that it was too much overload to have both classes. All right, and that's why I broke it up. Okay, and that's why I said why in the future it'll change to something else. I'm trying to get whatever's trendy, so to speak. You already saw the Bootstrap stuff this morning in the ASP.NET class. I'm not saying it's coming on, all right, but there's a thing that they have in there that's called LESS, all right, which is basically it's a broken down CSS and it's popular. All right, am I right in assuming that everything that's in here you understand? Just taking a quick look through it. All right, we could have done without the meta tags, you know, but that's just something that you standard put in. That's what Element had in there, so I just left this stuff in there. Okay. Again, this could have been anything we wanted, etc. Okay. I put some line breaks in there, and again, the only reason I did that was for these right here, so they looked halfway decent when I create, so we can create them later. Again, when you come in here next week, you might have a different, you'll have another folder. All right. Again, depends on how much time I get this week to see whether or not I did what had been done in here before, or I combine this into one. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I don't like the reports that are out there right now, so I'm going to rewrite all new stuff. I'm going to try to rewrite it, and I'm going to try to use parameters so you can see stuff. Okay, but we'll see how that works. I got a text from my wife before saying I want to go to St. Louis this weekend and visit your daughter, or our daughter. If we do that, then I got to take my computer over to her house, and probably I do less because I cart their butts all over the place when we go to St. Louis. All right, we'll see. So, we have now discussed everything in the CSS, the database, the image, and the includes. So let's just take it from the top. And we've also discussed these. All right, so I guess instead let's take it from the bottom. The connect file. This is put all over the place in there. We talked a little bit about this and saw an example similar to this the other day. I tried to annotate, put some comments in there, but yet I didn't want to make them real huge. Probably if I was going to set this thing up on a real web server, I would make sure this file would be buried someplace, and of course, my user's name wouldn't be root without a password. All right? But I would probably have some kind of a generic login. You may or may not have noticed, or maybe you've never even done this before. I'm not going to do it. But if I'm in Outlook and I go in, and I didn't even know this about me, okay? But if I go into Outlook and I want to send let's say that somebody doesn't know my email address, and they type in Scott, J, or even Scott, Jeff. There's going to be both a jscott@blackhawk.edu and a jscott@students.blackhawk.edu. They made a student account for all of us. Even the administrative people have a student account. All right. Why? Well, that way I can look at things from a student's perspective. So in that way, it really makes a lot of sense. All right. But you hear about things like backdoors, where a person will literally, you might have to go in and you might have to, there might be 5 or 6 levels that you have to get into an application, except if you're the person who's the head administrator. They give themselves a backdoor where there's a certain login they put in with a special password, and they come in and boom, they bypass everything. All right, that's typically not a real good idea. The only people who should be allowed to do that are administrators. All right, but again, a lot of times what you find is people, well, you have to have a password. There isn't any. You have to have one, so they make it root. Or they make their name admin, and they make their password name admin. And you might think, yeah, you're right. It happens a lot more than you think. All right. So localhost, and then the name of the database. Kept a lot of the conventions with a camel casing, but you know as well as I do, that stuff is not case sensitive. Watching some of the first year people, and it's interesting because you know this. Sometimes case matters, like in a variable name. Sometimes it doesn't. But I watched the other day, and I was helping Dave Brown and his group when they were working on the thing for the 157 class. It was like he started typing in a command. He got it all done. And before he hit enter, he went back and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, it's not in the same same caseness. It doesn't have to be." But you told, I said, "No, those aren't variables. Those are commands." And it's starting to resonate with some of them. All right, so attempt to connect. All right, to basically MySQL. That's all we're attempting to connect to right there. And again, I want to make sure that you understand some of this stuff. What this is doing could not connect, and it's going to give us the error. All right, and I showed you this the other day because what this is going to do is it's going to give you that error, but it's also going to die. Most of the time when you use database scripts, if you can't connect to the database for sure, or if you can connect to the database, if you can't connect to the database management system, you're dead in the water. If you can't connect to the database, excuse me, that'll sound good up there. I just belched. That will, then the same kind of thing will happen. All right, you're dead in the water. So typically you say or die, but you don't have to say die. You can say exit. But if you exit, you're still in the app. And that's an important thing to realize. So typically what you're going to do there is, rather than exiting, if you can't connect to your database management system, if you can't connect to your database, if you can't connect to your tables, just die. That's usually the way that it's done. All right? And again, that's not even a good message. By the time that was ready to go out there, if for some reason that ever got out there where this was going to be a commercial product, I would just say, your request cannot be processed at this time. Please try again later. And have some kind of a generic message I'd always be sending back. All right? Okay. I'm taking it that all makes sense to people. So we've hit all these. We've hit all these. So let's look at our home page, because there's not much in there. Then we'll go to the last three. That's it. But there's a common thread that you see in here. You come in at the top, even if it's just a PHP page, but you come in here at the top, you set your title, you include your header, you do your content work, all right, and you include your footer. And now I'm looking in here, and I'm thinking, you know what, they're probably, if you notice here, I've got a div, and I've got an ending div, all right. You may or may not have noticed this. I've also got an ending div right there. That could be problematic, because I've actually got two ending divs. So what I really should have done is either remove this one or come back to here and remove that one. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, it might run fine forever and never have a problem. But why, if you see something like that that looks problematic, you probably should get rid of it. And now that I think about it, well, let's see, we've got the include here. Let's look in the header. Because, like I said, I just took this stuff from Ullman. It's not Ullman's fault. It's Jeff's fault. Yeah. And you know what? Actually, it will be all right, because that's going to put around everything. That's going to put a content thing. And the one that's actually in here is not content. So that's going to be inside of the other div. So I guess it'd be all right to do it that way. In other words, just you can keep it the way it is. But what I'm trying to get across to you is there's a common look and feel for the way of doing this. That's what you should be getting toward right now. Because next semester, as we go on, I'm just going to assume you know that. All right? And that's the way we're going to be building stuff. The plan is in the 163 class, the Design and Implementation Projects class, we're going to do a project as a class. Literally. And it won't be this. I mean, I'll give you some of the, you'll have to key in. All right? And that'll be like the first 9 weeks. We're not going to go over the whole book. We'll probably go through about the first half dozen to 10 chapters, something like that. Then the rest of the semester, no, it's same kind of thing. You're doing a project, and you have to present that project at the end of the semester to me and a group of people we'll have in here. Well, I don't talk well in front of crowds. Well, tough darts. All right? You'll do it anyway. Even if you have to, and even if you do this and whatever, and, you know, and whatever. It's your chance to perform in front of people that ideally, conceivably, would be offering you a position. All right, I'm going to try to get people here from Data Dimensions. I'm going to try to get that woman there that I told you that sign is up there before. Steve Zimmerman has come the last couple years from Prent Corporation. Sometimes he'll bring one of his programmers with him, etc. Okay, we'll talk a lot more about that, you know, when it's this time next semester. All right, so like I said, I don't think there's anything more worth going through in here. I'll leave that one up, but I don't think we have to talk about it anymore. All right. So we've now gone through all of this, not the customers, but all of, try it again, all of that, and all of this. So the three hard things I save for the end: the customers, the delete customer, and the edit customer. All right. You'll notice that one thing, and I'm going to open them right now, but you'll notice that one thing that's not in here as we look through this. Come on, open it. Oh, that's interesting. As I stop running it. I'm sure we're going to get back to it in just a second. All right. So when we look at what's in here, as you'd guess, this is the hardest stuff. Oh, I know what it was. There's not, when you go to customers, there's not an insert in there because this is showing all of the customers. There are actually 27. There's 10 here, 10 here, and 7 here. And why am I telling you that? Because remember when I ran this, it said there were 27 customers. All right, so we're showing those. Now, if I wanted to have an insert, I wouldn't put it here. Does that make sense to people? I might have a new thing in here that would be called insert customer or something. And if I'm going to have an insert for a customer, then I don't want something like this to come up. I want a form to come up. And I want to be able to fill in all that stuff for the form. The only thing I don't want to have to worry about putting in is the ID. But I'll have to put in a last name, a first name, an address, a city, a state, a zip. I combined these two into one. But there was actually an area code and there was a phone number. I combined them. I used concat and I put the parens in there in the space to make it look a little nicer. The other thing I did too, just so you know, in the original database, this was 50 long. But I went in there and I did a search and I found out that the longest one that was in there was about 27 characters. So I cut it down from 50 to 30 because otherwise there was so much space here that it looked really ugly. There's still a little bit too much. It's acceptable. If this really bothered you, you could come in here and tweak this stuff. We could have just said ST for state, etc. I'm not worried about that stuff. All right? I mean, it doesn't look bad the way it is. Could it look better? It can always look better. All right, so let's go to customers first and look at customers. All right, same kind of thing. Setting the page title, doing our include. Now, I didn't have to do this. We could have taken that out of there and done everything together. The advantage of putting a little bit of stuff in here like this is if there's something special that later I decide I want to do on every page, I've got a common place I can drop it off in. Again, I don't have to do that though. The program will work fine if I remove this line and I remove this line because it's all PHP in here. It would still work. All right. All right. Requiring our database connection at the beginning. And wow, there we go. Freeing up our database connection near the end. All right. Again, I'm taking for granted that makes sense. Now you'll notice the display in here. All right, the display, and I'm not going to change it because notice I'm on the desktop, so it wouldn't matter, but it's the same file. That says 10 records per page. All right, because a lot of what's in here, the logic that's actually in here is deciding how many records you want to print per page and then figuring out where you've stopped on the current page. All right, in other words, 10 is a pretty easy type of thing. So I know that the second page, let's say there's 60 records. It'll be 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, etc. And that's what's basically going to be starting to be figured out in here. Okay? So the first thing we want to do is we want to figure out, okay, so we're figuring out with these, do we have records basically? Okay, that's what we're doing in here. Okay? So that's what this variable is holding, is basically it's going to be how many records we're going to have in here. Okay? And so is it numeric? Do we have something? And if it is, well, then we're going to start to figure out how many pages we're going to have. Okay? Then, I don't know if you remember this or not, but if I grab that right here, again, as always, there's kind of a method to my madness. I ran this for you first. Said select star from customers, and you got everything, all 27 people. When I run this, I just get that, right? That's all I cared about in here. I don't want to print out any customer information yet, but I need to know how many customers exist in the database. So when I'm going through my pagination, I know how many pages I'm going to have. Does that make sense? So that's why we have that particular query. Does all that make sense? Okay, so we're sticking it in $Q, and then that'll be the result. Now, what I want you to understand, because this is kind of confusing to people, when you run MySQL query like that, all right, you give it the database connection, boom, and you've got $Q. I could probably do this now. I could literally, right there if I wanted to, I could echo out $Q. Okay? But It's not going to even give me the number 27 like you think it is. Normally, what that'll give me, and I guess I can't go back to it unless I do this. If I come back, you may or may not have noticed this when we first started and I had you log in. All right. You see this? MySQL connection? That's what's known as a MySQL resource variable. When you run queries like that, typically what it does is it does hold the results, but all it shows you if you try to print them out is the value of the associated resource variable. And when you think about it, it sort of makes sense because not so much in this one, but later on in here, we're going to get to this in just a second, but later on in here, we're going to run this query. That query right there, that one, is the same query as the one we ran not custom voice. That's that one. But what we're saying here is I want it to start with the current record number and only go through and do it for 10 records. Does that make sense? So some of the logic that's in here is just in the pagination. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. All right, in the actual customers table. Because it's pretty simple to print this stuff out. It's just running the query. If we didn't do this, the program would still work. But you'd see all 27 would be on one screen. That isn't bad. But as time goes on, ideally, I'm going to have a successful business, and my customers may run into the thousands. And I don't want that to all, where you have to scroll through the same page. The other thing, notice, we ordered them by customer last name and then first name. That's different than the way that you would typically see it. So in other words, hopefully you agree with what I'm about to say. If you look at the screen right here, not only does the person running the program, not only does she or he not know the customer's ID, they could give a rat's butt, right? It made sense to set this up and to show the customers and do it in what? Do it in alphabetic order based on last name. Try to make it as easy for the person you're running the program for as possible. If I was doing this instead by, whatever, phone number or whatever, if it was by some other field, what I'm trying to get to is quite often if you're showing it by numeric field, you'll want to do it in descending order. But we could have just changed this and made it descending here. That would have probably been confusing to people as they iterated their way from Z to A as opposed to A to Z. That's all. All right. So again, we're coming in here, and now what this does when you run this, all right, it says take those results that you're working with, all right, and that's in $R. And what we're saying here is get the results as a numbered MySQL array. In English, what that means is you can create this as either a numbered array or as, remember the associative arrays? You can make it an associative array. I just chose to make it a numbered array. What automatically you get in location 0 are the number of records that were returned. That has 27 in it. Does that make sense? All right, for the customers. Now we have to figure out, okay, we set our display up here to 10. And here we just got 27. Is 27 more than 10? So in other words, do you have more than a page worth of records? Yeah. So what we're figuring out there is how many pages we're going to need. Does that make sense? And we're using the ceiling function because when we do 27 divided by 10, we get 2.7, right? Well, we can't have 0.7 of a page, so we use the ceiling function, so that bumps it up to 3 pages. Does that make sense? And if it's not, we know we've got 10 records or less, so pages is just equal to 1. Okay. All right, and what this does, it's a little bit confusing, but it basically says, where am I? Get my current location. You go, with this P and this S, we're going to get to those. They're down here. All right. But basically what it says is, am I at the beginning or am I at another page? The thing that's nice is what we know, and the reason that a comfortable number to use for pagination is a number that ends with 0, because you're always sure that when you get to a new page, that the next number that starts will be whatever you just ended plus 1, so it'll be like 21, 11, etc. Doesn't make the program run any better, but most people find that easier because we live in a decimal world. You raise your hand and go, yeah, but we're computer people. We do binary, decimal, octal, and hex. Yeah, but probably your end user doesn't do binary, octal, and hex. All right. So now that we figured all that stuff out, now we're running the query here. We're reusing that same variable because we're done using it from before. So we can use $Q again, and we can use $R again. Okay, if we needed to keep those, we could have put them in different variables. All right. The problem is if you do that and you keep writing more and more queries and people don't end up reusing the stuff, then you got a lot of waste, and that can slow the system down. That's all. All right. Then we just start to build. There's our page header right there. Customer records. That is this. That should make sense to everybody. All right. Then we just put everything in a table. Did it have to be in a table? No. All right. Not at all. And this, I came in there and started to do some striping. It didn't ever really work right, so I just kind of abandoned it. Okay. Sorry about that, but I mean, you could put this in. There's so many ways I could have taken this class, and every time I teach it in a different way, which might be a good thing or might be a bad thing. But one thing I never showed you in here, and I just want to mention it to you, if you have an interest, you can look it up on your own, but I just want to very quickly, I can show you here, that's fine. I think I'm doing the right here. This is one of the ugliest pages that you'll ever see, but HTML quick form is something that's built into PHP. What's really cool about it is if you get really proficient at it, it's very easy to build forms with it. So why don't you show us, Jeff? Because it's hard to get really proficient at it. All right? But what you can do too is if you don't want the user to be able to leave the page for whatever reason, even if all of their checks passed, but if you don't want them to be able to leave the page, you can do what's called put a freeze on the page, which means you stay right here. It's really a cool package. The problem is, again, there's a lot more to teach than there is time to teach it. All right? And if you're interested in it, look it up. In fact, as it says, this package has been suspended, but they've actually come out with HTML quick form too. And the idea is each time you do that, hopefully there's been upgrades to the package where it's better. Now, if you're interested in this, I do have some documentation. I'll be glad to put it out there if you want. All right. But again, like I said, after a while, it's like, Jeff, no, my head hurts. You give us way too much anyway, and I get that. All right. So again, this is just building the table, and as you can see in here, all right, this is just literally going to echo all the stuff out. I manually put in the paren, the area code, all right, and the paren, the space, and then, for the area code and the phone number. Notice with this one, it's a MySQLi ASOC. What ASOC is for associative array, because now I only have to remember the names of my fields. I don't have to remember their positions, but previously when I ran that one, did it and used it, as you already saw, wherever the heck that was, as an SQL num, because I only needed that one. But then when we ran the next query, we need all this stuff. And that's why it was set up as an associative array. Does that make sense? Right? And you say, well, how'd you know that? With time? All right, just doing stuff like that over time. Trying it a bunch of different ways. All right, and this says, so this right here, that you see right there, that basically is setting up the table. That's setting up this. Does that make sense? That's all that's doing. All this stuff that you see in here, I guess it won't let me highlight all of it. I guess it will. This, not that, come on, get off of there. That stuff that you see right there, including that E, that stuff is what's being done in here. Again, an associative array. Again, I tried doing stuff with the background. It just didn't work. A bunch of it, just forget that's even there, okay? And so I just worked with a background color and just made it white. But that's actually echoing all that information out. So you notice what is being done here, okay? While this, echo, and all of this stuff, everything that you see in here, that's inside of what? That's inside of an echo statement. All right? I'm not sure exactly where it ends, but it ends in here someplace. If we wanted to, we could have broken out of PHP and wrote it as just regular regular HTML. That would have worked just fine. All right? We finish up our table. In here, when you look, okay, what this does is that frees up that resource variable that I showed you. All right? Could I have actually freed up the $Q2? I believe it wouldn't have meant, yes, you could have. This closes the connection. All right, check to see if additional pages are needed to display the records. So what does this do? It's going to basically run through the same thing again, and it's going to make sure that when I go here, that all of this stuff that you saw in here gets recreated, the stuff on the top. Does that make sense? I know that based on the fact that there's 27 records, that I know I'm going to have 3 pages, so I know I'm going to need to replicate that stuff in there 3 times. All right? And that's what that's doing in here. Now, when you look in here, you'll notice that basically is where I currently am. Okay? So you might have to look at that before it makes any sense. But what I'm trying to make sure happens in there, all right, in there, and it's up in here someplace too. But you want to make sure when you're here, what you're writing, for example, let's just pick one. This one right here. That one. I want to make sure I'm writing record number what? I'm on page 2, so that's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I want to make sure I'm writing record 16. All right. S equals 10, P equals 3. So what is S? That's the number of records per page. What's P? That's the total number of pages. But as I'm iterating my way through there, I need to know exactly where I am on the current record to spit out the right one. Basically, it's easier than I made it sound. All right? But I just kind of wanted to show you what was going on in there. I don't know if that helped or not going through that. All right? Now, that's enough. That's an hour's worth. So what we'll pick it up on next time is we're going to go over the delete, and we're going to go over the edit. But what you'll notice is with the delete, and I'll run this just to show it to you. So I'm going to grab Rachel Patterson. Nothing against Rachel, but if I click delete, okay, we ask first. And notice we're even defaulting it to no. Now, again, as I said before, there's 2 things. First of all, this is one reason that you back up databases. Because you found out there were 2 Rachel Pattersons somehow. Or you meant that, there's a Rachel Patterson and a Rachel Peterson, or something like that. All right, that's why people back up databases, because human beings are going to make errors. But if I come through here and I default it to no, and you press yes anyway, and you press submit, it ain't my problem anymore as a developer. There's not really any more I can do about it than that. I mean, literally, I've said this before, and it's not funny. But when you click this, it comes back and it says they were not deleted. I mean, I could have come back in there and said a second time, are you sure now this is... But what you're going to find is if this is being used by an end user, they don't want that second prompt. Because now if they're going to be making, if we're making them delete people one at a time, now it's going to take them twice as long because they have to answer 2 questions. We might try to even set this up so eventually, and this would be some work, but it could be done. We could set it up so that you could come, for example, on the same page, and you could do a control click, where I could maybe grab that row, hold down on control, and then grab another row. It's not letting me do it here, but you get the idea, where you could remove multiple customers. All right? Do you want to do that? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. The bad thing about doing that, and that's a great, it's a great suggestion, setting up a checkbox list, But then what's going to happen is, let's say you've got 300 customers. All right, so you've got it on 30 pages. People are going to just go in there and start checking. And they're not going to do it a page at a time. They're going to do all 30 pages. They might check it once, no pun intended, to make sure it's okay, boom. Then they're going to remove all of them. And most people are not going to, when they do this, they're not going to read, even if you get a message that says, you're about to remove the following. They're not going to even look at it. Yeah, I know what I'm doing, boom. No, I didn't mean to remove that one. All right. I mean, that's just human nature. All right. Okay, so we'll look at that one next time. With the edit, I mean, this could have been set up as a pretty form or anything else. It's kind of hard to tell because this is white. That is a text box. That's a text box. 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 Okay? And literally just grab the stuff that's in there. You had to change it because that's not its name, so we had to build these, and just using HTML. The other thing that's in here about what you'll see when we go over this is I did not put a lot of error checking in it because it was already long enough. But one thing I do is I add the strip slashes in the HTML special chars, because again, I could have set this up so, for example, you could only put in alphabetic characters in there. That's what I'm doing with the first year people now. We've had a form, and we did the form first and made sure we made every field required. And we went through it, and I put just alerts in there, so if you left any of them off, it came up with the alerts. Then we came in with a social security number, and I showed them how to set up regular expression patterns, etc. And then we went back and did the same exact thing, but we actually used regular JavaScript, all right, and we made it where you'd get a message on the side. Now we're going back on Monday, and we're looking at the same one more time. In fact, I probably have it up here. And it's not perfect yet. Well, it'll never be perfect, but it's still a work in progress, let's put it that way. So we're doing that. All right, and when you come in there now, okay, but there is a way, I used to do it, and I can't remember how to do it anymore, but you can actually go in when you do this, you can play with that text. You can change the icon, and you can change the text. I want to do that. We're going to do all of them. And everything in here that's required, etc. And notice, too, if I put this in, so if I come in here and I start to put stuff in, okay, that kind of thing. So I could have done that same kind of checks, or those same kind of checks in here, but then this would have been a lot longer program. Would have been a lot more complete and probably the way it should have been. But I showed you that stuff in other chapters, and you've done that stuff in assignments. All right, so really, when we get into it and look at this, for example, if I look at the edit customer, there's not a whole lot in there. I think I check if it's empty, and that's it. Boom. Otherwise, I just say, boom, throw it in there. That's a little bit dangerous. What I really should have done, but I used a simple example here on purpose. Okay, because when you look right here, there's no numeric field in there. But when we get to this point where we've got orders and order details, those should be checked to at least make sure they're numeric. And if there's sensibility checks, like you can't have an order for a negative amount, that stuff should be done. That stuff I didn't do at first. That's why I pulled a lot of this stuff out, and I started making the changes to it. And that's when I did it. That's when I screwed the file up. So I'm still working on that one, but it'll be fixed. All right. What I'd like to do next semester is go back and recreate this, have us recreate this at the beginning of the semester, but do it object-oriented. Object-oriented, using object-oriented PHP. That's my plan. Okay. But somewhere along the line, too, we have to create a simple e-commerce site, and I want to do that. Okay. So, like I said, we will go over the edit and the delete in detail, and when you come in here, the next iteration of this that you get will have at least, I'm not sure about the reports, but at least the orders and the order details, that'll be filled in. Okay, if I have time, I'll do the reports too. Packers, Eagles, yeah, I want to watch that. Okay, so we'll see. Plus, I don't know if you know, but Sunday, I think it's Sunday night, Andrew Luck versus Peyton Manning. And that should be a good game. Okay. All right, so that's all that I had. Again, last thing I'm saying, and it's being taped. If you you can't get that assignment, I think we said it's due right before Thanksgiving. If you need to turn it in sometime in early December, then just do it.